If you could live in any way you want, what would your life look like? Would you own a business, be a homebody, or seek some kind of adventure? It's ideas like this that make stories so interesting. They allow us to step into other worlds and other lives. It lets us live out fantasies, if only for a fleeting moment. In the case of tonight's episode, we're going on an adventure unlike many of our previous stories. Tonight, we're looking into an animated classic by one of the most legendary teams in the medium. This movie captures several elements of noir fiction, including the overall plot and several key characters. The studio that made the film is most associated with films regarding flights of fantasy and stories of love, loss, and the importance of the natural world. This film, however, is somewhat more grounded, despite the main character being a flying pig. And no, I'm not joking. Welcome back to Nightly Noir, the channel that would rather be a pig than a fascist. This is the second episode of our Noirvember celebration. If you missed out on the first one on Detour, be sure to check it out. Tonight's episode is fairly special. We're talking about Studio Ghibli's 1992 film, Porco Rosso. Ghibli? Whatever. You may be wondering why this movie would be covered on this channel, but let me assure you, there's plenty of things to discuss on this film regarding noir because this might be the closest we'll ever get to a Studio Ghibli film noir. I would be a little surprised if you told me you'd never heard of Studio Ghibli. It is often called Japanese Disney due to the great impact they've had on the animation industry, much like Disney was. This is the studio responsible for amazing stories, including solid adaptations of some books, such as Princess Mononoke, Pompoko, Kiki's Delivery Service, and my personal favorite, Howl's Moving Castle. In the case of Porco Rosso, it's actually based off of a manga called Hikote Jidai. This manga was created by one of the heads of Studio Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki. It was a project born from his love for old planes and the era surrounding them. The manga is more lighthearted than the film adaptation, but many of the story elements are left intact. Porco Rosso follows the story of Italian ex-fighter, ace pilot turned freelance bounty hunter, Porco Rosso. The funny thing about Porco is that near the end of World War I, a strange curse had transformed him into an anthropomorphic pig. This is about the only fantastical element to the story. The rest is much more grounded in reality. We see Porco take on air pirates, a hotshot from America, and even his preconceived notions on what women were capable of. The atmosphere is very immersive, which is honestly what Studio Ghibli does best. No matter how simple the story, you can bet Studio Ghibli is going to pull you into the world of its characters. Alright, enough setup. Why am I talking about this brightly colored cartoon on a channel focused on dark, morally gray films from the 50s? Well, like I said in the intro, this film is probably the closest we'll ever get to the studio making a noir-like movie. Even the time period it's set in lends itself to this fact. The movie takes place between World War I and II, when fascism was growing in Italy and other parts of the world. There are several shots that are ethereal, sort of like noir, but obviously more colorful. There are plenty of quiet moments, reflective scenes, things you don't normally get from an animated title, unless it's from Studio Ghibli. One of the best parts of this film, aside from the characters and the visuals, is the music. The way the music in this movie evokes both adventure and a yearning in some cases reflects both the world of Porco Rosso and the characters. We'll get more into that later, but just know that the soundtrack for this film is really fitting for the story it's trying to tell. The major characters in the film are portrayed with nuance to an extent, at least for an animated film. They have a complexity that you don't see as much in animation from this era. Many of the characters in this film could somewhat fit into typical noir tropes. The Italian mafia is featured to a minimal degree. They're general onlookers during some of the major events in the film. Sadly, they don't play a very prominent role in the story. Gina, the owner of Hotel Adriano, is sort of a femme fatale, in the respect that she has married several pilots throughout her life, and then they die in air combat shortly thereafter. Her hotel is on an island and is frequented by ace pilots, air pirates, and the aforementioned Italian mafia. She's witty and confident, with a penchant for the refined. The only real outlier to this entire character lineup is the American ace pilot, Donald Curtis. He is most definitely a caricature of what the Japanese imagined many Americans to be at the time. The man falls in love with women the moment he sees them. He's pompous, irrational, and fairly simplified compared to the rest of the cast. That being said, he makes a good foil to Porco, who is often quiet, contemplative, but still confident. That leads us to examine the titular character more closely. Porco is easily what I would consider a noir-like protagonist. He's morally gray, he's pragmatic, he's anti-government. He keeps things close to his pork chops, his chest. He does things his own way and doesn't enjoy his plans being changed. He's highly independent, and his attitude is a blend of devil-may-care and dry humor. His sense of style is also very reminiscent of noir-style fashion. Of course, that might have more to do with the fact the film is set in the 20s. Many people from that period dress similarly, and even though he's a pig, he looks mighty fine in his suits and pilot gear. The biggest part of Porco's character arc is learning to fight for someone other than himself. Due to a tragic event in his past, and the way things ended up for him back when he still worked for the Italian government, Porco learned that he had to always look out for himself. As the story progresses, however, he makes connections with people that he probably wouldn't have otherwise if it weren't for very specific circumstances. Still, he is a very cynical person, and this is shown in how he interacts with everyone else in the film, most notably Fio, the granddaughter of his old plane mechanic, Piccolo. Not to be confused with Dragon Ball's Piccolo. Fio is the catalyst for Porco's character arc. She's bright and cheerful, but also shows a lot of inner strength. She does question herself at times, but that mostly comes from inexperience. She's only 17 at this point. Despite that, she shows impressive skill at designing aircrafts and understanding how they work. At first, Porco hates the fact that Fio is going to be the one to design the repairs to his plane after he gets shot down earlier in the film. He doesn't believe she's capable of taking on such a task, and at first is staunchly against her working on his plane. But soon, she proves herself by showing him her drafts of her early ideas. Piccolo also insists that Porco trusts her for this task. Then, Porco's entire worldview gets turned on its head when a bunch of women get brought in to help work on rebuilding his plane. These women are all related to Piccolo, I might add. This is Italy, after all. Big families and all that, you know. This is the start of Porco's change, and how these situations he finds himself in are all challenging what he thought he knew. These events, including Fio imposing herself to go with Porco back to reclaim his reputation, all culminate in Porco learning that he can help others and protect them in his own way. In some ways, this plot is a variation of some other noir stories, such as The Maltese Falcon, at least in terms of themes related to isolation and redemption. These are two major themes in Porco Rosso, as we start the film with him being all alone, and by the end he's found many compatriots, though he still puts himself in isolation at the end because he believes his lifestyle isn't good enough for those he's close to. This idea is heavily implied by Gina's romantic interest in Porco. It's never outright stated, but by the end of the film we understand neither she or Porco would acknowledge the nature of their relationship because Porco wouldn't want the choices he makes to leave Gina heartbroken. He believes that she deserves better than what he can offer, so he doesn't pursue that type of relationship with her. Porco is a lonely character at heart, and that's what makes it feel so much like a film noir. Despite its vibrant colors and expansive setting, the core of the film is still the exploration of Porco's isolation and his choices that keep it that way. It doesn't seem as if Porco feels lonely, it seems more of a personal choice on his part. I'd venture a guess that this has to do with the fact that he doesn't believe that he himself is a good person. He believes he's selfish, greedy, and egotistical. These are all true to an extent, but we see throughout the film that he exhibits other more positive traits too, such as helping others in need and behaving honorably when the situation calls for it. Regardless, Porco insists that he's still better off flying solo. Despite going out of his way to protect others and be a general force for good, he continues to struggle with keeping others at a distance. It could be that this is the result of what he experienced during the war as a fighter pilot. Without going into too much detail, from what we learn about his past, Porco is struggling with survivor's guilt. He was one of the only pilots to survive a major dogfight during the war, and I'd say he hates himself for it. It's for these reasons I believe he continues being a pig, because that is how he views himself at his core. Overall, Porco Rosso is a wonderful adventure story with several noir elements. Though it isn't my number one favorite of the Studio Ghibli films, it's a strong contender because of its themes and setting. It has many quiet, contemplative moments contrasted with high-octane action. Sounds a lot like many film noirs to me. At least those are my thoughts. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Looks like that's all I have on the docket for this episode. This has been Nightly Noir, and have good night.